Hello everyone and welcome to this episode of Ignition Time. The massive $2.25 trillion American jobs plan is now posing big questions as far as both sides, the Democrats and the Republicans, are concerned. Are we in a democracy or are we heading towards a government-style autocracy? Yes, is this a democracy or an autocracy? Because the future economic infrastructure of our country, and literally the infrastructure of our country, is about to see some massive changes because the American jobs plan is expected to pass through budget reconciliation. Not without its fair share of drama, but it is expected to pass. Let's start with some comments from the Senate Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell, as news of the American jobs plan has emerged. You'll see this tweet on your screen from Burgess Everett, the co-congressional bureau chief of Politico, who's quoting the Senate Minority Leader, Mitch McConnell. "We need to get to herd immunity." And he said there's no good reason not to get the vaccination. And then he says this about the infrastructure plan. It's the tweets on your screen. Biden's infrastructure plan is not going to get support from our side. The last thing the economy needs is a big whopping tax increase. It's interesting that he talks about the tax increase and not about what the infrastructure plan is going to do for the country. Folks, the tax increase is indeed a big area of contention, but politically, it looks like the Republicans have decided to position this as nothing more than a liberal wish list. In fact, we're about to see a couple of segments, and when you watch them, you're going to go, what? Speaking of unbelievable reactions, here's an interesting tweet on your screen from Ted Cruz, of all people, and he says, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez explains the real Democrat position, abolish ICE, and then he talks about open borders and, all of the things that a majority of the Republican Party is concerned about. And AOC fires back, Ted, this is pretty rich coming from someone who fled their own home and responsibilities during an environmental crisis to cross the border and seek refuge in Mexico. Now, it is a bit of an exaggeration, seek refuge, but this sort of tiff between AOC and Ted Cruz is pretty bizarre. Folks, this is an episode of the DC Comedy Hour. You've heard me talk about this. The DC Comedy Hour is bizarro city when it comes to Washington, DC. And also AOC says, also you funded cages, expanded cages, and yet you're complaining about cages. You have no policy, just fluff. Speaking of things that make you go, what? Did you just say that? Here's a tweet on your screen from Andrew Desiderio, who's a congressional reporter for Politico. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene introduced a bill that would reduce Dr. Fauci's salary to zero until a new NIAID administrator is confirmed by the Senate. The problem is the NIAID director's appointment is not subject to Senate confirmation. It looks like Marjorie Taylor Greene has no idea what she's talking about. All right, now speaking of interesting exchanges in a democracy versus an autocracy, the concept of vaccine passports from President Biden is receiving a lot of pushback. Here's Governor Tate Reeves, who's a Republican from Mississippi, talking about vaccine passports. He says the idea of the government requiring a passport to move freely within a free country certainly strikes me as a wrong approach. Let's roll the tape and hear from the governor.
But the idea of the government requiring a passport to move freely within a free country certainly strikes me as the wrong approach.
And another person that's absolutely freaking out is Senator Ron Johnson, who's a Republican from Wisconsin. He calls the Biden American jobs plan radical, and he says, we see the light at the end of the tunnel on the pandemic. We didn't need the $1.9 trillion. Let's hear from Senator Johnson.
I think America's awakening to the fact that President Biden is not a moderate. His agenda is radical. And I fear what we're going to discover is that he's going to be wrong on every domestic spending issue, every domestic policy issue over the next 4 years of his administration as well. We're already seeing the disaster of his policy as it relates to the southwest border. And now he's talking about probably adding another $6 trillion to our debt when we don't have to. We see the light at the end of the tunnel on COVID. We didn't need the $1.9 trillion.
While all this was happening, and while we mentioned Dr. Fauci earlier, this is very interesting. Here's an interesting exchange with Dr. Fauci where he disagrees with the CDC director who warned of impending doom. He says, I don't know if I would use the word impending doom. Let's roll the tape and hear from Dr. Fauci.
We heard the CDC director talk of impending doom as people loosen up and gather. Do you share her concern?
Well, I don't know if I would use the word impending doom. If you talk to Dr. Walensky, which we do every single day, the point she's making is a very valid point. We're seeing the cases that have plateaued over the last couple of weeks, and now they're starting to inch up. So the point that she was making was very valid.
And Senator Ron Johnson, who we just saw a couple of minutes ago, is not the only senator, not the only Republican senator who's alarmed with the American jobs plan. Here's an interesting clip with Senator John Kennedy, who's a Republican from Louisiana. He calls President Biden's American jobs plan a bold neo-socialist experiment, and he says the Biden administration is moving towards the Chinese model of capitalism. Yep. By the way, this is the same senator who's used phrases like spending porn as far as Speaker Pelosi's initiatives are concerned. Pretty colorful senator. Let's roll the tape and hear from him.
This is a bold neo-socialist experiment. I mean, this will be over $4 trillion of spending in less than 100 days. And by spending this massive amount of taxpayer money, it's clear that, to me, that the Biden administration is moving more toward the Chinese model of capitalism, where the biggest player in the economy is government.
And speaking of colorful, on a lighter note, I believe a big aspect of the economic recovery is going to be travel. People are going to want to travel, and people are going to want to get out there because people are sick of staying at home. In fact, Jim Cramer from CNBC says that people are going to travel like mad. In a very interesting segment on CNBC, let's hear what Cramer had to say.
Listen, every seat will be filled. They're going to Florida. Every seat. I mean, it is like, this is an extremely filled plane, and you can't put your bags. I mean, you're starting to hear that same language. And 3 months ago, you did not hear that. I think that there are many airlines that need more planes, and I think it's going to surprise you. I think that people are going to travel like mad. I don't even care about the business traveler. I know the business traveler flies up front. But I think that this is, when you ask people what they're going to do when they got their vaccine, they want to go somewhere. Obviously, they want to go to Disney World. The numbers were just okay for Disney World. But I do think that it's it's going to be an obsession to travel. Obsession. And by the way, I think, Carl, when Europe opens up, and it will open up, I think they'll come here. I think that there'll be tourism, even though the dollar is very strong. So I'm very bullish on tourism.
And finally, here's an article on your screen from the New York Times. 40 years after President Reagan, there's a big bet that the government can actually do something significant within the country. According to aides, President Biden feels a sense of competition. He feels a drive, he feels an initiative to prove that democratic capitalism can indeed work, and he feels this is a battle between the utility of democracies, in other words, what democracies can do in the 21st century, and autocracies, other countries like China. Fascinating article that you see on your screen. You'll get a link to this article in the description section below, so make sure to check it out. That's it, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Dr. Nitin Chhoda with Ignition Time. Please click the like button, please subscribe, please enable notifications. I appreciate you. You'll get the link to all of our resources in the description section below. Thank you so much for watching once again, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode of Ignition Time. Please click like, please subscribe, please enable notifications. I'll see you in the next episode.